When the pandemic began, convalescent plasma therapy, or simply plasma therapy, seemed like a silver bullet. It's basically using blood plasma from recovered patients and infusing it into newly infected patients. So if you've recovered, your blood plasma will be injected in a patient. How does it help? It is believed that with plasma, you transfer antibodies from recovered patients to new patients. This is supposed to boost the immune response of a new patient. Conceptually, this sounds like a promising idea, but does it work? There is growing evidence that it doesn't, and yet it is being widely prescribed in India. But experts are concerned. 18 clinicians, public health professionals and scientists have written a letter. The letter is addressed to Professor K. Vijay Raghavan, the principal scientific advisor to the government of India. These experts say India should stop using plasma therapy. The reason they give is this. Current research evidence unanimously indicates that there is no benefit offered by convalescent plasma. What is this research evidence they're talking about? It's part of the letter. In the United Kingdom, a trial was conducted with more than 11,000 patients. They were given plasma therapy, and it made no difference. Another trial was conducted in Argentina. It was a randomized trial. Half of the patients were given blood plasma, others got a placebo. Again, it made no difference. India has conducted its own studies. These were backed by the Indian Council of Medical Research, or ICMR. The studies involved 39 public and private hospitals. This is what they found. Whether it was patient mortality or disease progression, blood plasma made no difference. And despite all these findings, doctors are widely prescribing blood plasma across hospitals. Why are they doing this? Perhaps because they are desperate. They want to try every treatment that's available. But can this trial and error method be dangerous? For more on this, we're being joined by Dr. Sumi Adip Baumik, an international health specialist from the George Institute for Global Health. Now, a number of doctors, public health officials and experts have recently written a letter to the Centre's principal scientific advisor warning against irrational and non-scientific use of convalescent plasma for COVID-19. Do you agree with them?
Yes, I am one of the signatories of the letter, and I am definitely in agreement with every word written in the letter. And I believe there is a need for a review of the Indian Council of Medical Research and the AIMS joint guidelines for clinical management of COVID-19 to reconsider the whole sum of evidence and come up with a revision of the guidelines, which are based on evidence as well as takes into consideration the practical issues around implementation of recommendations which are currently being made in the guideline. And the guideline kind of makes an off-label use for convalescent plasma, and off-label by itself in its definition means something which is not approved. So we are really not sure how this is a part of the guideline, and hence we have written to the principal scientific advisor as well as the directors of Indian Council of Medical Research and AIMS to reconsider and revise the guidelines and come up with something which can help us clinicians and public health professionals as well as patients and to understand what is the evidence behind the guideline and deliver better care which can actually save lives of people.
Now, earlier, AIMS Director Dr. Guleria had mentioned that plasma therapy may be useful in early stages. Plasma treatment is being done across multiple hospitals of India. So what was the scientific reasoning based on which this was approved?
I cannot say about, so the guidelines which come up by the AIMS and ICMR, they do not come up with any references. So it's very difficult to know what has been done. But I believe this might have come from a very small trial which has been published sometime in January. But I think evidence or research evidence or scientific evidence does not situate itself in a vacuum. It's very much integrated into our health systems and practical considerations around it. As has been reported widely, including in your newspapers, and what we are seeing in daily lives, like we have the hospitals and everything totally burdened. Do we want, under these circumstances, that mild or moderate cases of COVID, who could have probably recovered at home, to come to hospitals just to get convalescent plasma? So I think these type of practical implications also needs to be considered in. And if you look at the guidelines, they talk that only plasma which is high titer should be given. But do we have the instruments to measure them in blood banks throughout the country? These are also important considerations to think about apart from the research evidence. We are in the midst of a pandemic where the health system is totally burdened. Us as healthcare workers, a community, we are totally overburdened, and there is a need for having guidelines which are practical and pragmatic and makes the best use of the available resources, and rather than thinning it out and providing very low or minimal benefit to us or the patients who are there.
And the experts behind the letter have also warned that plasma therapy raises the risk of more virulent strains developing. Do you agree with this?
Yes, as a signatory to the letter, I do agree with with what is written in the letter. I'm not a virologist, but a virologist who have been part of the consensus letter, and we do cite a Nature paper which shows a very, very, very early evidence that there is a risk of development of, there is probably a risk of development of more virulent strains, especially in immunocompromised people. So taking into consideration and the rapid surge of cases, I think we need to think about the risk-benefit of giving convalescent plasma. We have very doubtful benefit, if any, of convalescent plasma, as you talked just recently about the 3 trials, including the one from India, which was the world's first randomized controlled trial on the topic. And at the same time, there's a doubtful risk. So there needs to be balance. And so our request is to the guideline developing agencies who set the norm in the country to review and came up with a very clear set of guidelines, which is useful rather than something vague like an off-label recommendation.
Do you think the guidelines should be revised if there is no concrete scientific proof to back plasma therapy?
Yes, we have requested for a revision of the guidelines, and we would want the guidelines to be revised. And when they're revised, we would want them to be backed by evidence so that as researchers and scientists and doctors and public health physicians, we can make our own evaluations. And they should also be backed by evidence to decision, and they should be updated. We believe that there's an urgent need for doing that.
Thank you, Dr. Sumi Adip Baumik, for your insights into this. Now moving on, vaccination drives slowly gather pace as countries across the world continue to battle the pandemic.